Welcome to I Love to Tell the Story, a podcast on the Narrative Lectionary. I'm Rolf Jacobson.
I'm Kathryn Schifferdecker.
And I'm Craig Koester.
And this is the podcast for February 2nd, 2025 on Luke 6. And welcome back.
Yes.
Craig Koester.
So
Thank
good
you.
to have you, Craig. Thank you for coming back.
Yes, delighted to be here.
And Craig is back because if you haven't heard the news, our colleague Joy Moore has been called to be the president of Northern Seminary in Illinois. So we wish her Godspeed and welcome back. It's like that. There's these commercials on right now that feature backup quarterbacks, like brought in as if they're like in regular, like somebody can't back in the trailer, right? And so they call the backup quarterback. And so, yeah, it's great to have you back.
Yeah. I'm happy to pinch it. That's
exactly.
Just fine. Yeah.
And for those of you who are relatively new to the podcast, Craig was the originator, along with Rolf, of the Narrative Lectionary and long time podcaster of this podcast. So just great to have you back.
Thanks. It was fun to do.
The text for today is Luke 6, 1 through 16, plucking grain on the Sabbath.
Yeah, it's an interesting passage, and there are a couple of different texts that go with it. I mean, Sabbath controversy is really what this one's about. And what's interesting is to read this during Epiphany. And as I was looking over these, again, I was thinking about Epiphany, divine manifestation, revelation. And so the question is, how is Jesus revealed? Or what does this reveal about Jesus in these passages? And there are a couple of them. In the first one, it's plucking grain. In another one, it's a healing story. And to kind of read those two together and say, what is this revealing? How is God's power? How is God's character? How is God's presence revealed in Jesus through these passages? There's an interesting punchline in each one of them.
Yeah.
And what I find is so interesting is if you read the two together, I find that really, really interesting. Let me toss out a couple of things here. In the first one, doing the grain thing on the Sabbath, appealing to David, precedent in David, we can talk a little bit about that. But then we get to the punchline, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Okay, it's an assertion of lordship, kind of, doing a riff on David at that point, claiming a kind of lordship. And if I just take that one alone, I'm thinking, well, okay, lordship means that you're above the law. Lordship means that you do what you want. It's like, I wince a little bit if that one is just the only one. But then when I read the second one, it's, well, is it lawful to do good or harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to destroy it? Oh, well, if lordship means doing good, if lordship means saving life, if lordship means all of those things, then it's not just being above the law and doing what you want. It means lordship, power of lordship in seeking the welfare of the other, which is a very different form of lordship in my book.
Yeah. As the resident New Testament expert on this panel, Craig, these Sabbath controversy stories, do they occur in every gospel?
Yes,
okay.
they do. Yeah.
And the purpose, obviously Sabbath is a huge concept and law in the Old Testament, and it extends not just, begins in creation, seventh day of creation. It's one of the 10 commandments, both in Exodus and Deuteronomy. It extends to the Sabbath of Sabbaths, the Jubilee. Yeah. There's a Sabbath for slaves. There's Sabbath for the land. It's a huge concept, and the prophets bring it up often as well. Yeah. So what is if you had to say what is the purpose of these Sabbath controversy stories, what are they trying to tell us?
I would say the Sabbath controversy stories get to the question of what is the Sabbath for? And the Sabbath is ultimately for human well-being. Mm-hmm. And that's what Jesus is playing on. That if Sabbath is mostly about rule keeping, that can be a problem. If Sabbath is about well-being, then the question is, how do you get at that? Mm-hmm. And that's what really is constraining him. So on one level, he appears to be violating the Sabbath in the technical sense. On another sense, he's deeply keeping it by seeking human well-being.
Maybe one of the two of you know this. I don't know. I know that there is, in the rabbinic literature, there's debate and discussion about the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. At the time of the first century, do we know, is Jesus in the midst of this? Is he part of that same set of conversations?
Yeah, Jesus, I mean, yeah, he's certainly very much in conversation with people. And, you get people arguing about, well, if it says you're not supposed to do any work on the Sabbath, okay, work is a big category.
Yeah, right.
Look at your job description. There's a whole bunch of tasks, and how much of that is work. And so there was a lot of debate, what constitutes work. And if the debate spins off into too much of the legal technicalities, it's okay, how fine can we parse that in order to identify, well, like with healings or something, does healing just mean getting well? Are there certain circumstances in which healing isn't work? Is there a certain circumstance in which you can walk this far but no farther? And at some point, what Jesus is doing is trying to say, we got to go back to what is central. And so he is taking a stance in a wider debate by focusing on what is central and really identifying this is what constitutes the lordship, the kingdom that I bring in. It's seeking the welfare, feeding for the hungry, healing for the sick. And I'm not going to wait till Monday to do the healing.
Right.
Because life is needed right now.
Well, and there's disagreement within different Jewish sects about what the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Zealots, the Essenes, right? What work can you do on the Sabbath? If your donkey or your sheep falls into a pit, there's a lot of falling into pits. It seems like in the ancient world. Can you lift them up on the Sabbath? If a person falls into a pit, can you lift that? Right? And the Essenes, it seems, or at least whoever it was at Qumran seemed to have a different answer to that, right? No, you can't actually bring up a person from a pit unless you happen to be carrying rope with you. Yeah. You can't go back. There's just, yeah. But I think your larger point there, Craig, is really something to be emphasized, that in the Old Testament too, Sabbath is for life, right? Don't do any work, and don't make your livestock do work. Don't make your servants or the foreigner in your household do work, right? This is for well-being of everybody, not just the head of the household, but for everybody.
I do have one Greek question. At the end of verse 11, when it says, they discussed with one another, my translation is, what they might do to Jesus. And it's, I don't think there's a preposition there. It's just to Jesu. So just dative. Correct?
Yeah.
So that might not really be, it might be just concerning him or something. Or is it, no, it's to Jesus? What do you think?
I think it probably is. I mean, it is an indirect object. So it wouldn't be to him, or it would be to him rather than for him. So it would be functioning, I think, pretty much like it's translated.
Okay, let's say a word about the last part of the lesson, which is, this is the setting aside of 12 from among the disciples to be the apostles, which I don't remember this in Mark anyway, or am I just wrong?
Well, Jesus picks out the 12 in Mark as well, so it's there in all of them, and you get the sense in which they're joining in Jesus' mission at this point, and that's where, for me, I mean, and thinking about kind of the preaching angle on this, is how do you integrate all of these? What do these three things got to do with each other? Right. And that's where I think, going back to that sense in which, what does lordship look like? What does power look like? And what does it mean to be a follower of this kind of a Lord? I mean, I say this in a context in which there are debates about what constitutes Christianity and what are the basic manifestations of Christianity. And is Christianity primarily a power move? Is it primarily an assertion of dominance? And that's where, if you just take, I'm Lord of the Sabbath, I'm above the law, I do what I want. Hey, I want to be on his side. I want to be with the big guy. I don't want to be constrained. I want to have but then if that kind of lordship means freedom to do what you want, it ultimately gets spun wrong. If it's not lordship that is constrained by compassion for the neighbor, if it's not lordship that seeks the well-being of the other, and that's the constant theme in Jesus' Sabbath controversies. It's not just an assertion that I get to do what I want.
Yeah.
It's I get to do what they need. I get to seek their well-being. And so to bring the 12 in is a way of harnessing the church to that mission, to seek the well-being of the other. And that's what constitutes really true discipleship in Luke's gospel.
Well, and it's lordship that leads to the cross.
Yeah.
Right? It's lordship, not I'm Lord of the Sabbath so I can do whatever I want, but it's lordship of self-giving love, sacrificial love that leads to the cross.
I Love to Tell the Story is a production of Luther Seminary's Working Preacher. The narrative lectionary was developed at Luther Seminary and has been hosted on Working Preacher since 2011. Find episodes and links at workingpreacher.org/narrative. And be sure to rate, subscribe, and comment on YouTube. Thanks for joining us.